was back in December. We were at a couple of events in Miami all around Art Basel, and one of them was put on by an investment banking firm called Solomon Partners. And at the dinner they put on, this really nice restaurant and a really interesting gathering of people. A lot of family businesses, a lot of closely held businesses there. Wonderful people, and one of those wonderful people is with me today. His name is Joaquin Dulitzky, and Joaquin he was a standout in the crowd, not just because he's tall, but because he's personable and he's got great energy and a great story. And I thought it'd be wonderful to introduce you, Joaquin, to our audience today. How are things in your world?
Thank you, Jim. Thanks for saying those words. I felt the same about our connection. It certainly was our first time meeting. Um, Things are great. I live in Miami. I feel pretty fortunate of living here for the last 15 or 16 years, and it's a sunny day. Very, very busy day in Miami, increasingly busy over the last few years, but possibly a good thing.
How do you feel about all the New Yorkers who invaded Miami with the over the last half a dozen years with COVID? There seems to be a lot more New Yorkers now.
I think it's great. They bring, I could say, they bring dynamic energy, faster energy. I'm an energetic person, so I like it. I actually heard some are going back up north because they 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 felt that it was time to reach a broader artistic and cultural offering, which has been getting better in Miami. It really has, but I don't know if you'll ever match what you can find in New York, but it's great. I think more diversity, more conversations makes any place more interesting.
Now, Akeem, with your day job, that is at Bernstein Wealth Management, you advise families about their finances, but I suspect and recall from our conversation that your relationship with those families, those individuals that you work with in the wealth management business, your conversations, your involvement, your relationship goes way beyond finances and covers a whole lot of other things.
It does. Yeah, I started doing this in early 1995 and in Argentina, where I'm from. And it was really just about the investments. But over time, families that have the joy of having very significant wealth, but also the complexities or the burden of having to manage it became broader, became more complicated. And sometimes the conversation is about helping them find purpose again after they sold the business that maybe they started or their great grandfather started. It's solving other problems, which can range from a kidnapping of a relative in a distant country to how to refinance a business and bringing new partners. So it is very holistic and it's very personal. And I just can't believe how lucky I am to do that every day of the year.
Well, you mentioned that you're from Argentina, and so let's touch on some current events now. South America has been in the news a lot lately. Of course, your home country of Argentina having a president there, Milei, who's trying to get out of a tough financial bind and seems to be having some success. But I'd love to have your thoughts on how that's going.
Well, I try to read as much as I can. Plato and Homer and Aristotle. They talk about the different ways of seeing the pendulum of how societies behave. Um, I think Argentina really needed a very significant uh, reinvention and more scrutinized daily management of the finances and really a tighter grip on corruption and eventually giving business owners the ability to be out there and not depend on the government. I am, as an economist that I am excited about that opportunity. It really seems like in Argentina and a couple of the neighboring countries, corruption has really decreased. It had to hurt for a while, meaning a lot of
And
people are
corruption in those countries is a cancer of sorts that just really holds everything back, it sounds like.
100%. It is exactly that. It is what holds them back decade after decade and gets people to just often throw the towel and
Joaquin, Argentina has great geography. They're in the Western Hemisphere. So trade opportunities are enormous. They have a variety. They have good agriculture. They have good natural resources. Of course, oceanfront, and a city that I've not visited. I've never been to Argentina. It's one of the few places that I haven't been to that I'd like to visit. But I hear Buenos Aires is a beautiful city, and it's got culturally. I know I've met the gentleman who's the representative of the Irish community of Argentinians, of Jews, of Italians, of Spaniards, of Germans, of French. So it's got a really rich melting pot kind of culture. And I've always wondered, why hasn't it been more of a financial success? And would you attribute that to the former government it had in the past, or to corruption, or some combination?
I really think it's a combination. It was about 110 years ago. There was an expression, rich as an Argentine. So you would go to
Yep.
London and people would say that Argentina used to be one of the eight wealthiest nations in the world per capita, of course. But of course, things then changed. I think they lost the strategic vision. They were a little slow in moving away from a primary economy, basically providing agricultural goods to the world. They were a bit slow to industrialize, but they were a little too quick to create a state that would not have the right incentives for people to again drive drive themselves into the future
Hmm.
with entrepreneurship, for example. So it was a late comer into an entrepreneurial culture, that on top of course, severe corruption, a couple dictatorships with military folks that
Hmm.
were not again that focused on freedom and the opportunity for business people to flourish. So eventually, investments were, by foreign capital allocators were slow. And then, well, inflation became a significant problem as people lost trust in the local currency. You would get a dollar, they would immediately buy another local currency in Argentina, pesos, most of our history. So we had 10,000% inflation, in years. In
Wow.
my, I'm a little about 51 years old. I remember going to the market and the lady at the market would say, I can't sell you this carton of milk because it doesn't have a price. I don't know if it's worth 9,000 pesos or 18,000 pesos. So inflation, which is really a manifestation of people's distrust of the currency, became, a bomb that
Mm.
destroyed our country and others in the region.
And I would imagine, based on our conversation, that a lot of your clients, they're global, but you have because of you speaking Spanish, being from Argentina, I would guess that you have quite a few clients that are in Latin and South American origins.
Yeah, I have some. I speak Spanish and Portuguese, so I work with a few families, not many, but enough that
In Brazil?
have been there in Brazil and South America, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, and yeah, and some of those are sort of a new wealth. They sold businesses in the last 20 years, but others are third, fourth generation, privately held businesses.
And as we work our way up the coast, what do you think of Brazil's economic fortunes in the year or two ahead?
It is
I
going
didn't mean to
to
skip Paraguay and Uruguay.
Yeah, well, Paraguay is doing extraordinarily well because it is a simple pro-business small country that's doing things the right way.
Yep.
Uruguay is doing a good job equally, but Brazil is a gigantic economy, pretty much close to the size of Mexico. Brazil has very strong institutions, a world-class central bank. By many economists like me consider Brazil's central bank the best in the world. They have a leader um, that I think knows that he needs the business class to be comfortable to continue to invest in the country. Brazilians are, I work with big investors from Middle East, Canada, the US, Germany. Brazilians have the strongest home country bias. They love their country. They invest locally, but
Yeah.
interest rates are close to 15%. So what we have here as
Wow.
the Fed funds, that one day soon it'll be at 3%. Their rate is 5 times higher. So you know M&A activity is very sluggish and slow. So the economy is moving at that pace where if you have little oxygen, you can't breathe. Business owners can't borrow. eventually they need to fix that problem. I think they will. Their goal is to bring that rate down from 15 to 9, which would be better. Inflation there is about 5%. But Brazil that country really has everything given to be a true superpower. It already is the 13th largest economy in the world.
Wow.
Everything is given for them to be top 10. The leader of the country, Mr. Lula, um, I think has
Second
been
time around for him.
second time around. He's playing around some edges that are a bit scary for business, for large investors and the families that really lead the economic growth. And so what we see at Bernstein is often they knock on the door, that those families maybe have 8% of their wealth offshore, and sometimes they knock on the door in the last year and they say, we want to double our wealth offshore and really invest globally because they don't feel quite comfortable with the country's leadership in the near term. So I am not that optimistic near term, but I am, prudently optimistic medium and long term with Brazil.
Well, you can't talk about Latin and South America without talking about what happened a month ago, a little over a month ago now, with Maduro and his wife leaving Venezuela unexpectedly. I would think, I would think, first of all, that the U.S. learned a lesson back in Iraq when they toppled their regime and sent the troops home with their guns and no paychecks. That was not a good idea, as we've learned. But the idea that just taking Maduro and especially with Marco Rubio as the Secretary of State, being of Cuban descent and more than familiar with the area, he's really impressed me with his global knowledge and his attitude and his relationship with the president. I would think this is a hopeful time for Latin and South America. I know there in Miami, even on my infrequent visits there, I've met many very proud Venezuelan families who had to leave for security reasons. And just you can see they yearn to be back in Venezuela. Do you think that might happen? Do you think that could happen, that they'd feel comfortable enough to return at some point? Are you hopeful about the Venezuelan situation being a positive influence on that region?
Yeah, so I couldn't agree more. The answer is maybe to the first question and absolutely to the second one. A lot of families that I talk to, Venezuelan families, see it as a very, very long-term proposition, the idea of going back to that country that they still love, but feel it's just too broken and a bit dangerous. So they're not saying that, at least out loud to me. But I really think it was a strategic move that is giving big hope to the region. Some would argue that the morality and the rule of law, was it fully observed? And many would argue that it wasn't exactly that. But at the same time, if we ignore that, and I'm not an international attorney, somehow somebody had to end the destruction of that country that for, I believe, 42 years was increasingly being taken from the people. And now, number one, in terms of the strategic positioning against, some countries that are enemies of the U.S., for military reasons, I think the U.S. had to do something. Some would argue that if you control energy sources, you control power, and well, Venezuela has all the reserves that we know about.
Make this spring one to remember. Have friends over for a Sunday brunch, or celebrate special occasions like birthdays and baby showers with delicious food and gourmet gifts.
I told this story. I was in Southwest Florida a few months ago. My wife and I, we took an Uber, and the fellow who was driving the Uber was from Cuba. And he didn't speak any English, but with Google Translate, we were able to have a good conversation over his iPhone. And I asked him, why did you come here? And he just looked around. He said, look at what you have here. He says, I can't believe I'm driving this beautiful car. He said, back in Cuba, there's not enough food to eat. The children don't have medicines. And this is, 6-7 months ago. And he was saying, you don't realize how fortunate you are here and how unfortunate we are there. He says, my dream is to get enough money to go get my kids and get them out of there. But he said, unless there's a change, and I would love to go back and help build that country. So it just seems like there's a lot of good things going on. I'm so happy and proud to see the aforementioned President Duque so passionately lobbying for the U.S. to be the leader of this hemisphere that it could be for the benefit of everyone. And if what's going on in Cuba and Venezuela, what's not going on in terms of supporting China's intervention in this hemisphere, Russia's intervention in this hemisphere, and a few other bad actors, that comes down to a question you're so knowledgeable about. Nothing happens without capital. So what would have to happen for capital, private capital, to be comfortable reinvesting in those areas? There's 4+ million Venezuelans who are in Colombia. Who knows how many millions of Venezuelans came to the U.S. when the border was open out of desperation. So the flight from Venezuela has been tremendous, but the wealth of Venezuela is, as you say, a passionate a group of people who love their homeland, love their new homeland, but would love to see their old home be more prosperous, have people have a chance for a better life. So what will it allow them to consider reinvesting in those countries?
Well, I believe
And
that
when you say capital, when I say capital, I'm asking you to think broadly about capital. That's financial money, it's human resources, it's intelligence, it's creativity, all forms of capital.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I believe the institutional rigor of the rule of law has to be strengthened in some of these countries. So in some countries in Latin America, it already is fantastic. Like Uruguay, Paraguay, Chile, probably number one by far. But in those countries like
Colombia
Venezuela,
too.
Colombia too is up there among the
Mm.
top three. So the rule of law and knowing that you have your property rights and they cannot be taken away from you is, I would say, number one. There is an amazing Peruvian Nobel Prize winner, Hernando de Soto, who talked about that. Like Latin America is the way it is because of the weak property rights, but that really has been changing, and with leaders that focus on the rule of law and creating clarity towards
I
making
remember
it
Dinesh
easy.
D'Souza wrote a book about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
So having that kind of security, institutional security, I would say is number one. Number two, the other security, the one that, for example, used to not be present in Miami Beach 10 years ago. And now there's a new leadership in Miami Beach just the last few years that changed things around. And Miami Beach has
You and I got to
attracted
meet the new
significant.
mayor when we were together last.
We met Stephen Maynor, who changed things around by giving security to the street. So number one is property rights and the rule of law in Latin America. Number two, security in the streets. But then I think as they have a great way of communicating, if these countries can show the world that now they have those two conditions met, if they can have a good tactical and strategic marketing campaign to start attracting investments, and that again will be talent that would move back to these countries, hopefully work with the banks to inject liquidity from within. Innovation will come back, and entrepreneurs will say, I don't need to leave Venezuela or these countries. I can do it from within. And then investors will, from abroad will also bring capital, because these countries, still need foreign capital and foreign investments to really advance.
It's so encouraging to hear you say that, and it would be so good for all of us living in this hemisphere, if everyone in the world, if capitalism was allowed to flourish, and as you say, as an economist, rule of law, property rights. I think back of soon after the Maduro exit, the president met with energy company leaders, and they said, we understand the opportunity, but as a fiduciary, as someone who's responsible to their shareholders, they can't in good conscience, without some guarantees or some assurances, say we're going to commit to a 20-year investment cycle in this country. We've done it before, and that money was wasted. So I think your observations give color to why those assurances are necessary to allow capital to flow back. But let's turn to your job of managing, helping families manage their wealth and the other things that come with that. What do you think? You work with families from all over the world. What do you think sets the ones who seem to be, as you would define it, successful in managing their wealth and happiness and families? The ones who are successful, and if you look at the others who may be not as successful, what kind of things would you put on the list of things that you think are what those families do that make them more successful than others?
Hmm. Thank you, Jim. I love the question because this is my passion. I feel that it's my purpose in life to do what I get to do, as I was saying at the beginning. And my answer will start with values. Families that really found a solution and really got it together. Um, and it's the holistic definition of success, which should include, being happy, being together, of course, economically successful, having purpose. The number one reason I think is that they have processes to discuss values, to document the collective view of who we are, how we want to be remembered as a family 100 years from now, setting clear rules in conversations that are uh, open and mature, which can happen in one session or two sessions. That's why I use the word process. But
Mhm.
if from the get-go, and sometimes I love doing this with family that is about to come into significant wealth, um, because you can really get them to think about what's important to the kiddos in the family, children that are under 10, under 20 years old, and their view of what's important, but also what we learned from our, great grandpa and those values. If you document and organize that, and then have a process to keep it alive, alongside with the rules to make sure that there's, well, certain order and to avoid fights. Um, those are the families that continue going forward with purpose. And it is extremely important to say that there isn't one or two or three um, recipes that work for any one family. Even families in one, zip code in the U.S. have so many different recipes to make that a successful journey. But it should always start and end with values conversation and a process around that governance.
All right. I just circled the comment you just made around conversations. What are the healthy conversations that occur regularly in families that have found success? And I'm defining success not just as financial. We're assuming if they can afford to have you as an advisor, they're financially well off. So what uh, what conversations are they having that maybe others aren't?
So one of them is that the definition of success and who we are and what do we stand for. Are you a family that wants to be connected to the community? And do we do what we do? Meaning, if they are an economically successful family where maybe the matriarch is traveling around the world growing the business, why is she doing that? And why did we create our own foundation to support, inner city children, or biotech research to solve cancer or Alzheimer's? Why do we do what we do? I think the conversations need to be individual, to let everybody in the family express their view, and then collective, to eventually have a true, honest, deep buy-in to what we as a clan think it's important, that we understand the reason, the guiding, North Star. And then how are we solving conflicts is another important one. Having a
Mm.
space to talk about, I don't want to keep anything in the drawer. Having a safe place, and sometimes you need a moderator, a consultant. Sometimes I play that role at my organization, Bernstein. We have
I was wondering that.
teams. Yeah, we have teams that do that.
Mhm.
But I've been doing it for 31 years. So, I detect part of my role is to really pay attention as if I were
Look for those signals.
look for the signals and really dig deeper into, why did you say that, and let's go deeper, and get them to express it, and avoid the bigger conflicts that happen when you wait. A huge one linked to all this is, wealth could also be debilitating. There's a phrase that I like to say is, it's not wealth or money that can ruin children, it's parents. If parents in a very, very wealthy family are not talking to their children about their passions and their purpose and how they want to spend their time, and the children maybe grow up in a household where there's an aircraft that they have access to go places. Some youth in the family could not find the motivation because they maybe feel they're not worthy because grandpa was so successful and I don't know, I'm not that good at math. But it's the family creating a safe space for that child to say, I like ballet, I like the arts, I like arranging flowers in a special way, and do I necessarily need to be the CEO of a multinational corporation? Is it okay if I am somebody else? Would I be considered a successful family member if I am that?
Yeah.
So I believe all that can only happen in open conversations, eye to eye, ideally.
And Bernstein provides facilitation beyond you. You can tap into other parts of your firm that with this particular expertise to come facilitate some of those dialogues.
Yeah, we have a dedicated team of over 30 people that are mostly in Europe and America. We don't have local teams in Asia doing that, but we travel sometimes to Hong Kong, for example. We did it in December for a big family that's sort of reorganizing its governance. And what we try to do is we create tailored educational programs so that, again, the youth, meaning children ages 10 through 35, can understand risk, can understand how the economy works, but also how do you solve conflict without breaking it all. So we are really intentional about it, because eventually, if you have that strong foundation, you can then pour what you learn into the trusts and the different documents that govern the family's capital, so that there's a sense of peace, of unity, and then the economic success will continue. Arguably it would even be better and stronger because that other human foundation is cohesive and it has a purpose.
What I'm hearing in your comments about working with these families that have had some financial success is that part of the message is that is to communicate and make evident that each member of that family is part of something bigger. They're not just an individual. They're part of an immediate family. They're part of a broader family. They may be part of a business family. And I think it reminds me of a conversation I've had many times with a friend of mine. Her name is Ambassador Shabazz. And she works in Newark at Shabazz High School, named after her father, Malcolm X, on doing exactly that with very poor people, making sure they know they're part of something bigger, a high school, a club in that high school, a sports team, a community, a family, a church, so that when they're in their mode and they have to make decisions, it's not just, hey, I'd like that, I'll take it. No, how would my mom feel? How would my father feel? How would my aunt or my grandparents feel if I did this and they found out about it? Because they're part of something bigger. I think that's essential, whether you're rich or poor, to feel like you're part of something more than yourself, that you have responsibilities, that you carry on your sleeve other brands besides your own.
Yeah. Yes, Jim. I think that's it. It's what gets people to also stop paying such close attention to their belly button, to their ego, which is a bit of a monster. Freud would argue that, well, what are you going to do about it? It kind of controls us. But if you wake up in the morning and whatever you do, you meditate, you pray, you take a moment to ponder, and you visualize that you're part of something bigger, that you're there to give, to learn, and it's not only about you. It can help you so much. And even if you're the CEO of a 100,000 employee corporation, What if you take a moment to talk to your child in the morning, to ask deep questions and to get that boy or girl thinking about something different and not just himself or herself. So yeah, that openness, that sense of community changes it all.
I don't know if you've thought of this, but listening to what you just said, this question came to mind. Of the families that you work with, how many of them is faith an important ingredient in who and what they are?
I would say that both for myself and for Bernstein collectively, we have these global families that are certainly all different, but I would say that less than 20%, 15 to 20%, it's linked to not only faith, but a religious faith. And I always, we have processes to delve into those explorations to see how much of what they do is driven by that faith, be it religious or not. But I would say it's surprisingly, I guess, only 15 to 20% of the families are very clearly driven by that.
Well, last question then I'd ask you to talk about is, with the seat you have at the table, you just mentioned maybe you do it again in your 60s, 70s, or 80s. I'd warn you to be prepared for you're likely to live well beyond that, not only because you take good care of yourself, but, medicine, medical care, health, nutrition, all changing for the better. And AI is going to change a lot of things in terms of healthcare and discovery. So be prepared for a longer life, which leads me to this last question, Joaquin. The families you work with are successful. How do they, I know this is a generalization, but how do they think about the term retirement?
Absolutely. The families that I intimately work with, and it's a group in the 24, 25 families only. Most of them actually don't talk about retirement actively, but we actually challenge them to think about what's most important. Maybe now they can finally spend really more active time with other family members, friends, having experiences. Others just never want to stop. I actually met with one of my closest relationships, a gentleman in Dubai. He's an American in Dubai, a Minnesotan in Dubai, extremely successful serial tech entrepreneur, who told me, I'm just having too much fun. I'm deploying gigantic percentage of my wealth to achieve radical life extension for myself first and my friends, but eventually I think this will be available to all. We all know that it's coming. I really believe eventually it will be pretty democratized. So that's another reason to pause and ponder about what truly moves you and your purpose. Because if we all live into our hundreds, 100 plus, you want to make sure not only you have the capital, the family, the friendships, the purpose, but a well-rounded set of health tools at your disposal. Resist the temptation to drink too much alcohol or ice cream, and dare to invent new ways to continue flourishing and expanding your learning abilities. I think it's easier to learn and organize your mind now than ever before. So I hope people embrace that, because the people I work with, most of them think of what's coming with a big smile on their faces.
Well, thank you, Joaquin. Joaquin Dulitzky, extraordinary guy. I was looking forward to our conversation. I think our community knows why now. If someone wanted to get in touch with you, how do they do that, Joaquin?
This is I guess an open podcast, but the simplest way, and I'm going to be an open person. I have a phone number with 305-586-6668, and then through Bernstein's portal, people can find my email address and drop me a note. And
is that Bernstein.com?
Yeah, it is Joaquin.Dulitzky@Bernstein.com. Or if they go to Bernstein.com and they type Joaquin, we're a 5,000 people organization. I'm the only Joaquin. So I
Well,
will be there.
the only Joaquin in several different ways. Joaquin, thanks for spending time with us today. It was a pleasure to chat.
I enjoyed it so very much, Jim, and I hope you and everybody around you has a wonderful day.
Thanks, Joaquin.